Peregrine's Home for the X-Men of the Wizarding World, otherwise known as Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Kids. No, I'm just gonna call it Miss Peregrine's Home for the X-Men brats. That makes more sense. In this movie, there's this kid named Jake, who is told a lot of stories by his grandfather about this magical place where there's a school where there's these kids that come who have like weird abilities and stuff. They can turn invisible. There's a girl that can touch stuff and turn it on fire. So tragedy befalls. His grandfather passes away, and so this sets this kid out on a journey to try to investigate and find out what happened to his grandfather, and he stumbles across this school with all of these kids, and then we have our movie, basically. There's some kind of sinister plot involving his grandfather, and he has to work with these kids to try to protect the school, but also protect themselves from a nefarious plot involving Samuel L. Jackson's character, who is the villain in this movie. This movie is really weird. It had all the joy of a Harry Potter and all the potential of an X-Men movie wrapped in one, and it didn't accomplish any of that shit. Seriously, if you want a better version, just watch X-Men or Harry Potter. Don't watch this shit. So let's start with the dessert before the damn veggies. This movie's not horrible. The performances in the movie were actually very good. Eva Green, not only is she really sexy, she's the best Bond girl in history. She's kind of like a mixture between Professor Xavier and Professor McGonagall from Harry Potter. Stern, but she's also kind of open and gentle, and she talks really proper, and she's sexier, obviously, than both of them. I'd like to bend her over the barrel and show her the 50 states. For anybody who thinks that's not a saying, just watch Horrible Bosses. That's a saying. That's a real thing. This chick, Emma Purnell, she plays this girl who's really light and she can like float basically, and she can control air or propel air or whatever out of her. For the purposes of this discussion, since we are talking about Miss Peregrine's X-Men brats, I'm gonna call her Feather because she deserves a cool code name like Feather, and she was light as a feather in this movie. I don't know how I come up with this shit. I thought Tim Burton's visual style was really good too. I mean, Tim Burton, we all know, if you've seen a Tim Burton movie before, you kind of know what you're in for. I mean, it's kind of got that dark, over-the-top gothic feel to it, and he does a great job of capturing that fantasy element. He really did a great job of bringing this world to life and making you more interested in finding out about this world. So kudos to Tim Burton for giving me what I already expected him to give me. I already expected that shit to be good, and it was. And there's just a lot of really interesting stuff that could have been there if the movie decided to focus on that. Unfortunately, they didn't focus on it enough, and that's why we have veggies. My biggest issue with this movie is the main character, Jake, played by Asa Butterfield. Wait, he is the main character, right? Like, I didn't imagine that. I didn't dream that. He is the main character? Because he doesn't even feel like the main character in this movie. His character is just very meh. He's just very uninteresting. He's very boring. He's very bland. There's just nothing really interesting about him. He feels like he's just a guy. He just feels like a guy. He asks a lot of questions, and he pretty much walks around for 90% of the movie and doesn't really do much but ask questions and just questions. This kid, he just doesn't really do anything. I mean, he gets going like in the last 20 minutes of the movie where he's actually doing shit, but for a movie called Peculiar Children, you're more interested in these other peculiar characters, and the movie doesn't focus on them enough. It focuses on this kid. You feel like he's just the main character because the script demands that there be a main character. He's as bland as a blank piece of paper on an ironing board. He's like a big slab of meatloaf with no ingredients, no flavor. Like a Michael Bay movie with no substance. Wait. Actually, that kind of makes sense. I don't know why I said that. Forget that last example, but you know what the fuck I'm talking about. The momentum of the story is all over the place. It just shifts in pacing and tone. The movie's going along and you're learning about this world, you're learning about these kids, you're learning about this school and this magic place, and then you're kind of interested, and then the movie stops. And then it has to go back to his boring life in 2016. And then it goes back. And then it goes back. The story just kind of has fits of momentum that it can never really fix. Just one big incoherent mess in the second half of this movie. The story just starts jumping from point to point to point to point to point. Samuel L. Jackson usually is like the most hype, energetic, funny part of a movie. In this movie, I felt like anybody could have been Samuel Jackson. They tried to give him some weird backstory that doesn't really make sense, and it's just kind of like, okay, fine. Also, the movie just ends really abruptly. There's this big finale where they're facing off against the villain, and then that's over with, and then the movie pretty much just ends. Like, the movie's just kind of like, okay, all right, let's see if we can wrap that, and Done. Get out of here. Go. Credits are rolling. Oh, sure. I'll go. That's fine, dude. In the end, Miss Peregrine's home for the X-Men brats was pretty... It has potential, but the story lets it down in the second half. It gets really messy. The main character is really bleh. I can't go any higher than Fortress of Solitude. It's just a very average movie. Alright guys, that is my review for Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Go check it out, but I'm just saying, for me personally, I walked away disappointed with it. Like and subscribe to the show and the channel. And as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.